If we look at the e-commerce schedules, we see that we have some problems. W120 was drafted in 1991. I remember when the first internet email thing came up, and I remember asking our person in the faculty, is this just a fad? Do I really need to learn how to use this? In 1991, those who are at least my age will remember the big mainframe computers, with the big whirly scrolls of stuff on there, the ticket tapey stuff, and who would have thought that you could have it in your watch now? And so W120 wasn't designed for this, nor was the UNCPC codes. That was the same year. And so, of course, the industry, along with many others, claim that W120 is outdated. And as a consequence of that, making commitments under the existing subsectors creates uncertainty as to what the actual meaning of those subsectors is. Uncertainty for them, which they're concerned about, uncertainty for policymakers and regulators, which we might be more concerned about. One of the problems, as we've seen, is what is Mode 1 and Mode 2? And so that's part of the reason why we see now increasingly in new agreements that you have a chapter on cross-border services that integrates the two of them. They can't do that for TiSA because they need the GATS structure. One of the options is to do what the EU has proposed, of have a cluster of computer-related services, what they call an understanding on computer-related services. That this is the meaning of these subsectors, and we are committing to make commitments in these subsectors so we have a coherent whole. That's what the EU has been pushing in the WTO during the GATS 2000 negotiations. It's pushing currently in the WTO for the new e-commerce, and it's been pushing in TiSA. In addition, another way of getting around this is the technological neutrality, so that your commitment, you don't need to have a commitment in computer-related services if you can include the technology into the substantive service. And just a little word about technological neutrality. As I mentioned previously, it is not in any rules. There is no binding obligation on technological neutrality. It is not in the scheduling guidelines for the GATS. The WTO has published Secretariat has published several papers that present it as existing. But they kind of acknowledge that not everyone agrees, and the WTO operates by consensus. In any case, the Secretariat has no power to amend WTO agreements. That has to be amended through a formal process under the agreement establishing the WTO. There have been a couple of disputes. Internet gambling, when the US banned internet gambling from Antigua and Barbuda. And they lost, because the schedule didn't mean what they said the schedule means, so even the US can get its schedule wrong. And it was argued in that case, but the outcome didn't determine it. It wasn't determinative to the outcome. There was also a case against the US brought against China on periodicals, and that too was in China on periodicals, where China said, we have not agreed to this. And the panel said many members of the WTO believe technological neutrality applies. Yeah? But there hasn't even been at the dispute level any conclusive interpretation, and in any case, even if there was, it doesn't bind, it doesn't alter the meaning of the agreements. But in TiSA, we haven't been able to find out what the position is. Have they discussed it? Have they agreed on it? Two negotiators we asked one of them when we met with a bunch of negotiators, and they just kind of smiled. And another one I asked recently said, of course it does. But there have been rejections of it recently by several countries again in the WTO. Now, the reason I'm going into this in some detail is that it is something that you have to push your governments, those especially who are going to deal with the e-commerce stuff, to say that how can you possibly say that the commitments that were made 20 years ago should be subject to technological neutrality, or that those that you're entering into under TiSA are to be applying in 20 or 30 years' time. Yeah?
The question, does the technological neutrality only refer to the electronic device, or also, like, for example, if there is electricity delivered via electronic commerce, but also it doesn't matter whether it is fossil fuel or solar energy? Yeah, there is a bigger, and that's in the Norway energy proposal. It's the same concept, yeah? And the answer is